The year was 2247, and humanity had finally reached the stars for 200 years. They had dreamed of this moment, and now 12 massive alien vessels hung in orbit above. Earth-like gods looking down at insects, Ambassador Sarah Chun stood in the Great Hall of the United Nations, wearing her finest diplomatic uniform, and she tried very hard not to show her fear. The Velthari delegation entered first, and every human in the room stopped breathing. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Each Velthari stood nearly 3 meters tall, and their bodies were made of living crystal that shifted colors with their emotions. Their leader was called Kethrin, and he moved with the confidence of a being who had never known defeat. Behind the Velthari came representatives from 11 other species, and each one was more impressive than the last. The Moradi were massive creatures of living stone who could survive in the vacuum of space without protection. The Silvani were beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form 10,000 years ago. The Krix were insectoid warriors, whose exoskeletons could stop plasma fire, and so they came one after another, and each species had gifts that made humanity look like children playing with toys. Sarah Chun felt smaller with each passing minute. The assessment had been explained to humanity 3 months ago when the Galactic Concord first made contact. Every new species had to prove their worth to join the galactic community, and today was humanity's turn to show what they could offer. The Great Hall fell silent as Kethron raised one crystalline hand. "Let the assessment begin," he announced, and his voice rang like 1,000 bells. The human delegation began their presentation with pride in their hearts. They showed the fusion reactors that powered their cities and the terraforming projects that were slowly turning Mars green. They demonstrated quantum computers that could process more information in a second than old Earth computers could handle in a century. They presented their art and music and literature and science. When they finished, Ambassador Chun looked up at the assembled aliens with hope in her eyes. Then the laughter started. It began with the Velthari and spread through the alien delegations like a wave. Kethrin's crystalline body turned a deep shade of red, which Sarah would later learn indicated amusement mixed with contempt. "This is what humanity offers?" he asked, and his voice dripped with mockery. "Your fusion power is a toy that our children outgrew before your species learned to walk upright. Your terraforming is crude manipulation that we mastered before your sun finished forming. Your quantum computers are primitive calculators compared to the minds we built for entertainment." Sarah Chen felt her face grow hot with shame, but she forced herself to speak. "We are a young species," she said, and her voice remained steady despite her trembling hands. We have much to learn, but we learn quickly." Kethrin moved closer, and Sarah had to crane her neck to look at his face. "You misunderstand," he said, and something like pity entered his voice. "It is not your technology that fails you, though it is laughably primitive. It is your very biology." He gestured at the human delegation with one gleaming arm. "Look at yourselves," he continued. "Your bodies are soft and easily damaged, and a wound that would merely inconvenience a Velthari would kill any of you. You require sleep, which renders you helpless and vulnerable for a third of your existence. You feel pain so intensely that it can incapacitate you completely. Your minds are fragile and break under stress, and you call this condition trauma. You age and weaken and die within a single century, while I have lived for 6,000 years and will live for 6,000 more." The other alien species murmured in agreement, and Sarah saw disgust on faces that she was only beginning to learn how to read. "You are by any objective measure the weakest sentient species ever to achieve space travel," Kethrin declared. "It is frankly astonishing that you survived long enough to leave your planet at all." A Marathi delegate stepped forward, and his stone body grinding as he moved. "The assessment is complete," he announced. "Humanity is hereby granted protected status within the Galactic Concord." Sarah knew she should feel grateful, but the word protected felt like a cage closing around her species. "What does protected status mean, exactly?" she asked. "It means we will not allow other species to harm you." Catherine explained as if speaking to a child. "Your world will become a nature preserve of sorts. You may continue your existence, and we will study you from time to time. Perhaps in another 1,000,000 years you will evolve into something worthy of true membership." The alien delegations began to file out, and their laughter echoed through the great hall. Sarah Chun stood frozen in place as the weight of what had just happened crashed down upon her. Humanity had reached for the stars, and the stars had judged them worthless. Behind her, an old man in a military uniform stepped forward. General James Morrison had fought in 3 wars before he retired, and he had seen humanity at its worst and its best. His face was weathered and scarred, and his eyes held a light that Sarah did not understand. "Ambassador," he said quietly so that only she could hear, "do not despair." Sarah turned to look at him with tears threatening to fall from her eyes. "Did you not hear them?" she whispered. "We are weak and we are fragile, and we are nothing compared to them." General Morrison smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just been underestimated. "They measured our technology and found it lacking," he said. "They measured our bodies and found them fragile. They measured our lifespans and found them short." He placed a scarred hand on Sarah's shoulder. "But Ambassador, they measured the wrong things entirely." Sarah stared at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" The old general looked up at the ceiling as if he could see through it to the stars beyond. "They see our weakness as a flaw," he said. "But they do not understand what weakness has taught us. They do not know what it means to be afraid and to fight anyway. They do not know what it means to be mortal and to sacrifice everything for those who will live after you are gone. They have never learned to lose and to get back up and to keep fighting until there is nothing left." His grip tightened on her shoulder. "One day, Ambassador, they will learn. And on that day, they will understand why the universe should have been afraid of the species that evolution tried so hard to kill." Sarah Chun did not understand his words that day, but she would remember them, and years later when the darkness came for Earth, she would finally understand what the old general had meant. The stars had mocked humanity's weakness. They had no idea what that weakness had created. 3 years had passed since the assessment, and humanity had learned to live with shame. The Galactic Concord treated Earth like a museum, and alien tourists would sometimes visit to observe the strange, fragile creatures who had somehow stumbled into space. Then the Khazari came, and everything changed. The Khazari hegemony had broken away from the Concord centuries ago, and they had spent that time conquering everything in their path. They were insectoid creatures standing 2 meters tall, with black chitinous armor that could stop most weapons. Their bodies had 6 limbs, and their heads held compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. But their most terrifying feature was their hive mind. Every Khazari was connected to every other Khazari through a vast psychic network controlled by their overmind. They moved with perfect coordination, and they felt no fear, and they never hesitated, and they never stopped. When the Khazari invaded the outer territories of the Concord, the elder species responded with confidence. The Valkyrie sent their fleets, and the Moradi sent their warriors, and the other species contributed what they could. It was not enough. The Khazari did not fight like other species, and they did not care about losses, and they did not negotiate. They simply advanced in endless waves until their enemies were overwhelmed. Colony after colony fell, and the mighty Valkyrie retreated, and even the Moradi, who had never known fear, began to feel something cold growing in their stone hearts. Then the Khazari reached the Terran frontier. These were humanity's outer colonies and small settlements on harsh worlds that the Concord had allowed them to keep. The Khazari expected easy prey, and the weakest species in the galaxy would surely fall without resistance. They were wrong. The first battle took place on a mining colony called New Helsinki and the Kasari landed 10,000 warriors expecting surrender. Instead, they found 300 humans who refused to die. Private Marcus Webb was 22 years old, and he had never wanted to be a soldier. But when the Kasari breached the colony walls, he picked up a rifle and he fought. He took a plasma bolt to his left arm in the first hour, and the limb was burned beyond saving. Any other species would have collapsed from the pain, but Marcus Webb did something the Kasari could not understand. He screamed and he cursed, and then he kept fighting with one arm. The Kasari had studied human biology, and they knew that such a wound should incapacitate a human completely. The pain alone should have rendered him helpless, and the blood loss should have weakened him beyond the ability to stand. But Marcus Webb fought for 6 more hours, and he held a corridor alone, and he killed 47 Kasari before they finally brought him down. His last words were recorded by his helmet camera. "Tell my mom I love her." He gasped through blood-stained teeth. "And tell these bugs they can go straight to hell." The Kasari took New Helsinki, but they lost 2,000 warriors to capture a colony of 300 humans. The Overmind received this report and analyzed it with growing concern. The pattern repeated across the Terran frontier. On Kepler's Hope, a civilian freighter captain named Rosa Vasquez saw a Kasari carrier approaching a refugee convoy. She had no weapons and no military training, and her ship was a rusty cargo hauler that was older than she was. She aimed her ship at the carrier, and she accelerated to near light speed, and she sent one final message to the convoy. "Get them home safe." She said, "I will buy you time." The collision destroyed the carrier and killed 8,000. Kasari, and Rosa Vasquez became the first human to earn a name in the Overmind strategic database. On Terra Nova, the colonists received word that the Kasari fleet would arrive in 6 hours. They could not evacuate, and they could not fight, and they knew they would die. So they rigged their fusion reactors to explode, and they waited. When the Kasari landed expecting slaves, they found a world that burned itself rather than submit. The Overmind studied these events and tried to understand and failed. These creatures were dying, and they knew they were dying, yet they continued to fight. They prioritized the survival of others over their own existence, which made no evolutionary sense. They exhibited an emotion the Kasari had no word for because they had never experienced it. The closest translation was rage, but that was insufficient. Human rage was not mindless, and it was not temporary. It was cold and patient, and it burned hotter when their young were threatened. A Kasari scout force learned this lesson on the colony of New Eden. They captured a school full of children, intending to use them as hostages. The parents of those children came for them. They had no military training, and most of them had never held a weapon, and they were teachers and farmers and shopkeepers. They killed every Kasari in that building with tools and kitchen knives and their bare hands. The rescue took 11 minutes, and when it was over, the children were safe, and 43 Kasari were dead, and 9 parents had given their lives. The Overmind watched the footage from the dead scout's sensors and felt something it had never felt before. It analyzed the emotion and found no match in its database, and this disturbed it greatly. A report was sent to the Kasari High Command. "These humans are not like other prey." It read, "They do not surrender when defeated, and they do not flee when outnumbered. They continue fighting while dying, and they sacrifice themselves for others without hesitation. They feel pain more intensely than any species we have encountered. Yet pain does not stop them. They feel fear, yet fear does not control them. Recommend immediate strike on their homeworld before they can organize. Cut off the head and the body will die." The High Command agreed. Forget the colonies, and forget the slow advance. The Kasari Armada would go directly to Earth, and they would end this strange species once and for all. 1,200 warships changed course, and the largest fleet the Kasari had ever assembled began its journey toward a small blue world that had no idea what was coming. On that world, humanity continued its daily life, and children went to school, and people fell in love. And old men told stories of wars long past. They did not know that darkness was coming, but when it arrived, they would be ready. For humanity had been fighting for survival since before they learned to walk upright, and they had never lost that fight yet. The sky above Earth turned black with Khazari ships. 1,200 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel and arranged themselves in a sphere around humanity's homeworld. From the surface, it looked like the stars had been replaced by metal. And death, the United Nations received the Khazari transmission within minutes. Surrender your world. The Overmind commanded through 1,000 voices speaking as one. Your colonies have fallen and your species is defeated. Submit, and some of you will be allowed to live as servants. Resist, and you will be erased from existence. President. Elena Vasquez stood in the command center beneath Geneva, and she looked at the tactical display with steady eyes. She was the granddaughter of Rosa Vasquez, the freighter captain who had rammed a Khazari carrier to save refugees. She had her grandmother's courage and her grandmother's stubbornness. How many ships do we have? She asked. Admiral Chun looked at his console, and his face was grim. 47 combat-capable vessels, Madam President. The Khazari have 1,200. The math was simple, and the math was death. A Galactic Concorde diplomatic vessel hung at the edge of the solar system, and Ambassador Catherine watched from his crystal palace aboard the ship. He had come to witness humanity's surrender, and perhaps to offer some small comfort to the species he had once mocked. He expected tears and begging, and the desperate pleading of creatures who knew they were about to die. He did not expect what happened next. President Vasquez appeared on every screen on Earth and every screen in the Khazari fleet and even on the Concorde diplomatic vessel, people of Earth. She began, and her voice was calm and clear. The Khazari have come to destroy us. They believe we are weak because we feel pain. They believe we are fragile because we can die. They believe we will surrender because we are afraid. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was iron. They are wrong. For 200,000 years, humanity has survived on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages and plagues and predators and famines. We survived each other. We did not survive because we were strong. We survived because we refused to quit. Today I am activating the Omega Protocols. Across the planet, soldiers and civilians alike felt something shift in their hearts. The Omega Protocols were not a weapon, and they were not a technology. They were permission. Permission to stop pretending to be the gentle species that the galaxy expected. Permission to show what humanity really was. Permission to unleash the monsters that Earth had created. The Khazari landed their ground forces, expecting broken survivors cowering in ruins. They found something else entirely. In Tokyo, an old woman named Yuki Tanaka heard the Khazari breaking down her door. She was 87 years old, and she had lived through 3 wars, and she had buried 2 husbands and 4 children. She picked up her grandfather's katana from the wall where it had hung for 60 years. When the Khazari burst through the door, she was waiting. She killed 3 of them before they brought her down, and her last words were a curse in a language the Khazari would never understand. In Detroit, a mechanic named Marcus Johnson watched Khazari warriors march through his neighborhood. He had spent 30 years fixing cars and trucks and anything else with an engine. He looked at his bulldozer, and he looked at the Khazari, and he smiled. The machine was not designed for combat, but Marcus Johnson was very good at improvising. He drove that bulldozer through 4 Khazari squads before they finally stopped him in Snow Paulo. A teenager named Ana Costa saw Khazari heading toward the shelter where her little brother was hiding. She had never held a weapon in her life, and she had planned to become a teacher. She picked up a metal pipe from the rubble, and she ran toward the alien screaming. She knew she was going to die, and she did not care. All that mattered was giving her brother 1 more minute to escape. She gave him 3 minutes in the skies above. Earth humanity's 47 ships faced 1,200 Kasari warships. The pilots knew the math, and they flew anyway. Captain James Webb was Marcus, Webb's older brother, and he had joined the Navy after his brother died on New Helsinki. His ship was called the Remembrance, and it was already damaged from the first wave of fighting all ships. He announced over the fleet channel, "They think we are afraid of death. They think fear will make us run. Show them what humans do with fear." The Terran fleet charged, and they knew they would not survive, and they charged anyway. For every human ship that fell, 2 Kasari ships burned, and the ratio made no sense to the Overmind. These creatures should have been paralyzed by terror, yet they fought harder when afraid. The Kasari captured a human pilot whose ship had been disabled, and they brought him before an interrogator. The pilot's name was Lieutenant David Park, and he had 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung and burns across half his body. The Kasari interrogator tried to extract information through pain. David Park laughed in its face. "You call this torture?" He gasped through bloody lips. "I've been through divorce proceedings. You are going to have to try much harder than this." The interrogator did not understand humor, and it especially did not understand humor during pain. It increased the intensity, and David Park screamed, but he did not break. Between screams, he continued to mock his captors, and he made jokes about their appearance, and he asked if their mother had mated with a cockroach. The interrogator reported to the Overmind that the human was defective. He continues to resist despite pain that should have rendered him unconscious. The report stated, "He appears to gain strength from his own suffering. He exhibits an emotion I cannot identify." The Overmind studied the footage and felt that strange cold sensation again. It sent a query to the captured pilot through the interrogator. "What is this emotion you feel?" It demanded. David Park looked directly at the sensor recording him, and he smiled with blood-stained teeth. "That feeling you have right now?" he asked. "That cold thing growing in whatever you use for a heart? That is called fear. Get used to it, Bug. Because every human on that planet feels it too, and it has never stopped us yet." Ambassador Kethran watched the battle from his ship, and he felt something he had not felt in 6,000 years. He felt doubt. He remembered standing in the United Nations 3 years ago, laughing at humanity's weakness. He remembered mocking their fragile bodies and their short lives and their capacity for pain. Now he watched those fragile creatures fight with a ferocity that made the Kasari look tame. An old general had said something that day, and Kethran had not understood it then. They measured the wrong things. The human had said, now watching Earth burn and refuse to die, Kethran finally understood humanity was not weak. Humanity was something far more terrifying. Humanity was what happened when weakness learned to fight back. The war had lasted 3 months, and the Kasari were losing their minds. The Overmind had conquered 100 species across 1,000 years, and every conquest had followed the same pattern. Shock and fear, and then surrender. Humanity refused to follow the pattern. Every tactical model failed, and every prediction proved wrong, and the Overmind began to wonder if it had finally encountered something it could not defeat. The Galactic Concord watched from afar, and the elder species whispered among themselves, "How are they still fighting?" The Marathi ambassador asked, "They have lost half their fleet and 1/3 of their population. Any other species would have surrendered by now." Ambassador Kethran had stopped laughing weeks ago. He spent his days watching footage from the surface of Earth and trying to understand what he was seeing. On his screen, a group of human soldiers held a hospital against a Kasari assault. They had run out of ammunition hours ago, and they were fighting with knives and broken furniture and their bare hands. One soldier took a Kasari blade through her stomach, and she kept fighting. She killed 2 more aliens before she collapsed, and her last act was to shove a grenade into the wounded her own body. The explosion took 4 Kasari with her. Why? Kethran whispered, "Why do they not surrender?" A human advisor had been assigned to the Concorde vessel to answer exactly these questions. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chan, and she was the same ambassador who had been mocked at the assessment 3 years ago. "You still do not understand us," she said quietly. "Explain," Catherine demanded. "Make me understand." Sarah looked at the footage on the screen, and her eyes were sad but proud. "You see our weakness, and you think it makes us lesser," she began. "But our weakness is what made us who we are. We evolved on a death world, Ambassador. Everything on Earth tried to kill us. Predators and disease and weather and starvation. We should have died 1,000,000 times over. But we survived." She turned to face Catherine directly. "Do you know how we survived? We learned to endure pain because pain taught us what to avoid. We learned to feel fear because fear kept us alert. We learned to love because love made us protect each other. We learned to die because death made every moment precious. Your species evolved without real challenges, Ambassador. You became strong, but you never learned to struggle. We struggled every day of our existence, and struggle made you as into something else entirely," Catherine considered her words as the battle continued on the screen. "But you are dying," he said. "Your species is being destroyed. How can you call this strength?" Sarah smiled, and it was the same smile that General Morrison had worn 3 years ago. "Let me tell you about the monsters of Earth," she said. "Not the soldiers, though. They are terrifying enough. Let me tell you about the others." She pulled up a new image on the screen. It showed a human in a heavy suit, carefully cutting wires on a Kazari explosive device. "This is Sergeant Maria Gonzalez," Sarah explained. "She's what we call an EOD technician. Her job is to find bombs and disable them before they explode. Every single day she walks toward things designed to kill her. She has defused 437 devices in her career. Any one of them could have been her last." Catherine stared at the image. "Why would anyone choose such a profession?" "Because someone has to," Sarah replied. "Because if she does not do it, then innocent people will die. She is afraid every single time, Ambassador. And she does it anyway." She changed the image to show humans in white coats running through a burning building. "These are firefighters," she continued. "Their job is to run into burning buildings when everyone else runs out. They die every year doing this job. They know they might die. They do it anyway." Another image showed humans digging through rubble with bleeding hands. "Search and rescue teams," Sarah said. "They crawl into collapsed buildings looking for survivors. The buildings could fall at any moment. They go in anyway." She pulled up image after image, and she told story after story. Combat medics who ran toward gunfire to save wounded soldiers, doctors who worked in plague zones, knowing they might catch the disease, parents who threw themselves in front of danger to protect children who were not even their own, teachers who shielded students with their bodies during attacks, ordinary people who saw someone drowning and jumped into the water without thinking. "We are not brave because we do not feel fear," Sarah said softly. "We are brave because we feel fear more intensely than any species in the galaxy, and we have learned to act despite it." Catherine was silent for a long time. "There is more," he said finally. "Something you are not telling me." Sarah's face grew dark. "Yes," she admitted. "There is more. The ones we do not speak of. The ones who do terrible things so that others do not have to." She did not pull up images this time. Every species has predators, Ambassador, but humans had to become predators to survive. We created people whose job is to walk into darkness and do what must be done. They lie and they deceive and they kill. They carry guilt like ammunition, and they sacrifice pieces of their humanity to protect it. Many of them never come home. The ones who do come home are never the same. They are broken in ways that cannot be healed, and they chose this willingly, knowing what it would cost them. Sarah met Catherine's eyes, and her gaze was unflinching. "You asked what the monsters of Earth, our ambassador. They are not our soldiers or our weapons. They are teachers who die protecting students. They are parents who lift cars to save trapped children. They are strangers who run towards screaming. They are ordinary people who find extraordinary courage when it matters most. That is what humanity is. That is why we will never surrender. That is why the Khazari will lose. An alarm sounded on the ship, and a tactical display lit up with new information. The Khazari. Overmind had made a decision. If it could not defeat humanity, then it would destroy Earth entirely. A decision. If it could not defeat humanity, then it would destroy Earth entirely. A finand. Planet killer weapon was being deployed, and it would collapse the entire world into a black hole. Sarah looked at the display, and her face went pale, but she did not despair. Call your fleet, she told Catherine. Ask them to help us, please. Catherine hesitated, and shame flickered across his crystalline features. The Concorde has voted, he said quietly. We cannot risk our ships against the Khazari. I am sorry, Sarah at him. For a long moment, then she laughed. It was not bitter or angry. It was the laugh of someone who had expected nothing more. Then watch, she said. Watch what happens when humanity has nothing left to lose. Watch what we become when there is no hope. And remember this day, Ambassador. Remember it when you tell your children what you saw. She turned and walked toward the shuttle bay. She was going home to die with her people, and Catherine watched her go and felt something crack inside his ancient heart. The Singularity bomb hung in space surrounded by 300 Khazari warships. It was beautiful in a terrible way, and its surface swirled with energies that bent light and twisted reality. In 6 hours it would activate and Earth would collapse into a black hole, and humanity would cease to exist. Admiral Chum looked at the tactical display and did the math one final time. Humanity had 17 ships left, and half of them were damaged beyond combat effectiveness. The Khazari had 300 ships guarding the bomb, plus another 400 maintaining the siege. There was no way through. President Vasquez stood beside him, and her face was calm. How long do we have? She asked. 6 hours, Madam President. Can we evacuate anyone? No, ma'am. The Khazari have the planet surrounded. No ships can escape. Vasquez nodded slowly. And then she did something that surprised everyone in the command center. She smiled. Then we have 6 hours to do the impossible, she said. Get me a channel to every human being who can fight. Her face appeared on screens across the planet and on every ship in the system. My fellow humans, she began. You know why I am speaking to you. The Khazari have deployed a weapon that will destroy our world. Our fleet cannot reach it. The Galactic Concorde will not help us. We are alone. She paused and looked directly into the camera. I am not going to lie to you. I am not going to pretend we have a secret weapon or a clever plan. What I am going to do is ask for volunteers. We have ships, not warships but cargo, haulers and mining vessels and passenger shuttles, ships that can reach the Khazari line. If we throw everything we have at them, I need people willing to board those ships. I need people willing to fight through the Khazari fleet. I need people willing to reach that bomb and destroy it. You will probably die. Most of you will definitely die. But if enough of us go, then some of you might get through. And that is all we need. One ship, one team, one chance. The response came within minutes. It came from everywhere. Soldiers and civilians and old people and teenagers, teachers and mechanics and doctors and artists, people who had never held a weapon in their lives, people who were terrified. They volunteered anyway. Within 2 hours, 17,000 humans had boarded every ship that could fly. They were given weapons and basic instructions, and they knew they were going to die. They came anyway. Admiral Chun watched the ragtag fleet assemble, and he felt tears running down his face. What are you people doing? He whispered. A young woman's voice came over the communication channel. "We are doing what humans do, Admiral. We are fighting for our home." The fleet launched, and the Khazari opened fire, and the slaughter began. Ships died by the dozens, and humans died by the hundreds, and the Khazari line held. But the humans kept coming. A schoolteacher from a snowpolo named Maria Santos flew a cargo shuttle through a gap in the Khazari formation. Her ship was hit 6 times, and she was bleeding from wounds she could not count. She crashed her shuttle into a Khazari destroyer's landing bay, and she stumbled out with nothing but a fire axe. She made it 3 decks before they killed her. She killed 9 Khazari on the way. Her helmet camera recorded her final words. "My students are watching." She gasped. "Show them what humans do." Across the fleet, 17,000 similar stories played out. A grandfather who has survived 3 wars piloted a mining vessel into a Khazari carrier's engine. A teenager who had planned to become a musician used her ship as a battering ram. A mother of 4 strapped explosives to her chest and walked into a Khazari command center. They were afraid, and they were dying, and they kept coming. The Khazari overmind watched and felt that cold sensation grow stronger. These were not soldiers. These were teachers and farmers and shopkeepers. They were afraid, and the overmind could detect their fear. But they came anyway. Slowly and possibly, the human fleet pushed through. Ships fell by the hundreds, but for every ship that died, another took its place. The Khazari line began to crack. A single shuttle broke through the final defensive ring. Inside were 5 humans who had never met before that day. Alana Rodriguez was an electrician from Buenos Aires. Thomas Anderson was a retired physics professor from London. Maria Chun was a grandmother who had outlived 3 husbands. Jake and Emma Morrison were twins who had just turned 18. They had no military training, and they were terrified. And they flew toward the singularity bomb anyway. "Can we disarm it?" Jake asked. Professor Anderson studied the readings, and his face was grim. "No," he said. "The only way to stop it is to detonate it prematurely, away from Earth. Someone would have to pilot the bomb into the Khazari flagship. They would not survive." The shuttle was silent. Then Maria Chum, the grandmother, spoke. "I have lived 84 years. She said quietly. "I have seen my children grow and have children of their own. I have lived a good life. You 4 have barely begun. Let me do this." Emma shook her head fiercely. "No. We all came here knowing we might not go home. We do this together." Elena looked at the singularity bomb growing larger in the viewport. "She is right," she said. "We all volunteered. We all knew. Let us finish this together, Professor." Anderson began the calculations, and his hands were steady despite his fear. "I can plot a course into the Khazari flagship," he said, "but I will need to do the final calculations manually. There will be no time to escape once we begin." Jake took the pilot controls, and his sister took the weapon station. Maria and Elena strapped themselves in beside the professor. The shuttle moved toward the bomb. "For the record," Jake said as they approached, "I am absolutely terrified right now." "Me too," Emma replied. "Me too," Maria whispered. "Me too," Elena admitted. "Me too," Professor Anderson added. Then Jake laughed, and it was a real laugh full of genuine joy. "Good," he said. "That means we are doing this right." They attached their shuttle to the bomb and overrode its controls. The singularity began to destabilize, and reality warped around them. Maria Chen looked at the young people beside her, and her eyes filled with tears. "I am so proud of you," she said. "All of you. Your parents would be proud. Your species should be proud. Humanity will remember this day." Professor Anderson completed his calculations. "Course is set," he announced. "We have 30 seconds. Jake pushed the throttle forward, and the makeshift weapon accelerated toward the Khazari flagship. 20 seconds. Emma took her brother's hand. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." He replied. 10 seconds. Maria closed her eyes and thought of her grandchildren. 5 seconds. Elena whispered a prayer in Spanish. 1 second. The singularity bomb detonated inside the Kasari flagship. The resulting explosion destroyed the flagship and 300 surrounding vessels. The Khazari armada shattered on the Concorde diplomatic vessel Ambassador. Kethran watched the explosion light up the darkness of space. He had lived for 6,000 years, and he had never seen anything like it. Beside him, Sarah Chun had returned to the observation deck to watch humanity's final hour. She saw the explosion, and she fell to her knees, and she wept. They did it. She whispered, they actually did it. 3 months later, the Galactic Concorde requested a new assessment of humanity ambassador. Kethran stood before the human delegation, and his crystalline body was dim with something that might have been shame. What are you? He asked. We have watched your species fight and die, and we still do not understand. The human representative was a veteran named James Morrison Jr. He was the grandson of the old general who had smiled at humanity's first assessment. He carried his grandfather's words in his heart. You called us weak because we break, he said slowly, and you were right. We break and we scar and we bury our dead. We feel pain and fear and despair. Every battle costs us something we can never get back. He looked at the assembled aliens, and his eyes held a light they had. Learn to fear. But here is what you missed, Ambassador. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived not because we were strong. We survived because we refused to stop. You can kill us. You can break us. But you cannot make us quit. We are spite-given flesh. We are endurance that does not know when to die. We are what happens when weakness learns to fight back. He smiled, and it was the same smile his grandfather had worn decades ago. You wanted to know what Earth's real monsters are, Ambassador. It is all of us. Every single fragile, stubborn, ridiculous one of us. And now the galaxy knows. Kethran was silent for a long moment. Then he did something no Velthri had ever done before. He bowed. The Galactic Concorde formally recognizes humanity as a full member species. He announced, not because of your technology or your weapons, but because you have shown us something we had forgotten. You have shown us what it means to truly fight for what you love. The stars had mocked humanity's weakness. They had laughed at human fragility and human fear. They had called humanity the weakest species in the galaxy. They would never make that mistake again.